The plunge was disorienting, a sickening lurch that stole breath and equilibrium. One moment, they were confined in sterile humming cells. The next, an invisible force ejected them, tumbling onto a carpet of spongy alien flora. The air hit them, thick, humid, and heavy, with the pervasive scent of decaying leaves and something unsettlingly metallic, like freshly spilled blood mixed with rust. It was cold, too, a profound, damp chill that quickly seeped into their bones, promising deeper discomfort. Above, the sky was a swirling vortex of deep violet and sickly green, pulsating with unheard energies, casting an eerie, otherworldly glow upon their sudden predicament. Out there, hidden behind a shimmering, energy-dense observation barrier, the overseers waited. They expected shrieks of terror. They anticipated primal, panicked flight, a desperate scramble for safety that simply did not exist within this meticulously crafted crucible. This environment was designed to test the limits of lesser species, to observe their breaking points, to document their frantic descent into chaos. Instead, a grunt escaped Jax's lips. Then, a remarkably calm voice cut through the alien silence. "Well, ain't this a surprise party?" Jax, a man whose permanent smirk often belied a sharp, observant mind, pushed himself up, brushing dark, clinging soil from his worn cargo pants. His eyes, usually crinkled with good humor, were narrowed now, rapidly scanning the towering, moss-draped trees that loomed like skeletal giants in the gloom. No panic, just an immediate assessment. Maria, a petite woman whose startlingly bright eyes missed nothing and whose multi-pocketed tool belt seemed to contain a miniature hardware store, clapped dust from her hands. "Surprise is an understatement, Jax. Think they dropped us in the swamp level? Or maybe the biohazard zone?" Her voice remained remarkably calm, almost tinged with a detached amusement. Another man, Kai, rubbed the back of his head, eyes already searching the ground for anything useful. "Definitely swamp. And what's that smell? Like a rusty bog monster just farted out an entire iron foundry." He sniffed the air again, a wry grimace on his face, then pointed to a cluster of iridescent, bioluminescent mushroom-like growths. "Edible, you think? Or will they make us glow in the dark?" A beat of silence stretched, not filled with despair, but with an almost palpable hum of human assessment and calculation. Maria pulled a small, well-worn multi-tool from her belt, extending a flint striker. "Only one way to find out about dinner. But first, fire. This damp chill is going to be a much bigger problem than glowing bellies if we don't warm up." She began methodically scraping flint, sparks spitting weakly into the humid air. Jax, ever the pragmatist, crouched, his hands feeling the strange foliage beneath him. Anyone else feel a weird, low hum? Like we're stuck inside a giant malfunctioning microwave oven? He found a patch of seemingly dry, brittle-looking stalks beneath a massive, glowing fungal cap. This might work for kindling, if it doesn't spontaneously combust. The overseers' omnipresent sensors registered no frantic attempts to escape, no desperate pleas for mercy, no signs of the expected terror. Instead, they recorded low, steady voices conversing. The rhythmic click-clack of stone against metal. The rustle and scrape of vegetation being gathered with purposeful intent. Then, a spark. A tiny, defiant flicker of orange against the alien gloom. "There we go!" Maria exclaimed, blowing gently, coaxing the nascent flame to life with a practiced hand. The crackle grew louder, a familiar, comforting sound in an utterly alien world. Soon, a small, defiant campfire crackled, casting dancing shadows that pushed back against the oppressive violet-green glow. The smoke, thin and acrid, carried the sharp scent of burning alien wood, mingling with the damp earth and that persistent metallic tang. The tiny spark caught, a frail defiance against the overwhelming damp and chill. Maria nursed it with a care usually reserved for a newborn, her breath a gentle whisper. Then, a flicker. A tentative flame danced. Then another, catching hold of the odd brittle stalks Jax had found. It wasn't long before a small, determined fire roared, its orange-red glow pushing back against the oppressive violet green of the alien night. The warmth was immediate, a glorious invasion of chilled skin. Every muscle, every bone that had ached with the pervasive cold began to relax. The metallic, decaying scent of the forest still clung to the air, but now it was laced with the sharp, clean smell of burning wood, an aroma that instantly grounded them. Jax held up his sizzling, glowing mushroom. The strange, bulbous cap had softened, glistening with moisture. "All right, brave souls, who's first for alien barbecue?" "Chew," he challenged, a glint in his eye. He took a tentative bite. A moment of chewing, a thoughtful pause, then his eyes widened slightly. Not terrible. Kinda like a mushroom crossed with a really tough steak. Earthy, savory, and, surprisingly, doesn't make my tongue glow." Maria snatched one for herself, blowing on it before taking a small bite. Her brow furrowed in concentration. He's right. It's edible. A bit chewy, but it'll do. Adds a certain rustic charm to our weekend getaway, doesn't it? She looked around at the towering, alien trees, their leaves dripping with bioluminescent dew, a faint smile playing on her lips. Who knew forced alien abduction came with complimentary gourmet foraging? Kai, already halfway through his own roasted mushroom, chuckled. "Gourmet is a strong word, Maria, but I'm not complaining. Beats whatever nutrient paste those overgrown insects were probably planning to feed us." He shivered. But this time it wasn't from cold. Imagine what they're seeing on their monitors. 3 humans, supposed to be terrified, sitting around a fire, roasting who knows what, and making jokes. Above, beyond the shimmering observation barrier, the overseers, data streams were indeed overflowing with anomalies. Their predictive algorithms, calibrated for maximum terror and desperation, were failing to compute. The specimens were not cowering. They were comforting each other. They were Tamsdidicum and desperaing, the indigenous flora. They were flapping. "You know," Jax began, his voice dropping slightly. "This actually reminds me of that time back home, camping upstate. Remember the storm? Tents flattened, rain like a waterfall, and we ended up huddled under that lean-to, sharing cold baked beans and telling ghost stories until dawn." He took another bite, a genuine sense of nostalgic warmth seeping into his tone, entirely unconnected to the heat of the fire. Maria nodded, her gaze distant for a moment. "And we survived that too. Just like we'll survive this. Only difference is, I think this time, the Ime ghosts are probably watching us on some cosmic CCTV." She poked the fire with a stick, sending a shower of sparks upwards, a tiny, defiant constellation in the alien sky. The heat pulsed, steady and reassuring. It was more than just warmth, it was a defiant pulse of human life, an assertion of normalcy in the face of the utterly absurd. They had been dropped into a death trap, designed for despair. Instead, they found a strange sort of comfort, a primal satisfaction in the crackle of fire and the shared taste of survival. Humanity, it turned out, didn't just endure the wilderness. It domesticated it, one campfire at a time, no matter how wild the wilderness truly was. The alien dawn was less a break of day and more a shift in the kaleidoscope. The violent purples and greens of the night slowly softened into bruised blues and hazy golds, filtering through the dense, strange canopy overhead. The air remained thick, humid, still carrying that underlying metallic tang, but the pervasive chill had eased, replaced by a humid warmth that promised sweltering midday. The campfire, once a defiant beacon, was now a bed of glowing embers, radiating a gentle, sleepy heat. Maria was already awake, her nimble fingers stripping long, fibrous strands from a thick, vine-like plant she'd found while gathering more kindling. The plant's outer layer was tough, leathery, almost like bark, but beneath it lay a network of surprisingly pliable fibers. She worked with a focused intensity, her brow furrowed in concentration. The repetitive motion of pulling, separating, and twisting became a quiet, rhythmic hum in the otherwise silent jungle. Scratch, pull, twist, scratch, pull, twist. It was the sound of ingenuity, of human hands refusing to be idle. Jack stirred from his spot near the embers, stretching with a low groan that echoed strangely in the alien stillness. He watched Maria for a moment, then pushed himself up. "Morning, MacGyver." "Building us a rope ladder out of here already?" he quipped, his voice rough with sleep but already carrying its usual hint of easygoing humor. He picked up one of the fibrous strands, testing its strength. It snapped with surprising resistance. Maria didn't look up immediately. "Not a ladder, but close. This stuff is strong, Jax. We need cordage. For shelter, for carrying things, for whatever else this delightful wilderness decides to throw at us." She held up a short length she'd managed to braid into a surprisingly sturdy-looking string. "Think of it as our first step towards a proper base camp. Can't call it camping fun if we're just huddling around a fire like cavemen, right?" Kai, who had been meticulously inspecting the strange, metallic-looking soil near the edge of their clearing, straightened up. "She's got a point, and that strange clicking sound I heard just before the dawn cycle? It definitely wasn't a friendly cricket." He nodded towards a particularly dense patch of glowing, thorny bushes. "Something's out there, and it sounded like it had too many legs. The casualness in their voices, the almost domestic rhythm of their actions, stood in stark contrast to the palpable tension that still clung to the edges of their small, fire-scarred clearing. The jungle itself felt alive, observing. Every rustle of unseen leaves, every distant alien shriek was a reminder of the raw, untamed danger surrounding them. But the humans? They were focused on the task at hand. Their immediate practical response to an alien death trap wasn't panic, it was preparation. Maria continued her work, her fingers a blur. The rough fibers bit into her skin, leaving faint red marks, but she ignored it. The satisfaction of feeling the pliable strands twist and bind, becoming something stronger, something useful, outweighed the discomfort. It was a primal satisfaction, the ancient human joy of creation. She was taking the raw, indifferent materials of an alien world and bending them to her will, shaping them into tools for survival. "Okay, so what's the plan then?" Jax asked, picking up a handful of the raw fibers and awkwardly trying to mimic Maria's twisting motion. He fumbled, the fibers refusing to cooperate. "You're the expert, Maria. Teach an old dog new tricks, or at least how to tie a proper knot out of alien plants." Maria finally looked up, a small, knowing smile on her face. Her eyes, though tired, held a spark of that unmistakable human defiance. "The plan, Jax, is to turn this whole survival test into an actual weekend trip. And every good camping trip starts with setting up a solid camp, doesn't it?" The crackle of their small, defiant campfire, now replenished and burning brightly, felt like a miniature fortress against the vast, unknown expanse of the alien jungle. But even with the comforting warmth and the shared roasted shrooms, an itch started to spread among them. It was the undeniable human urge to look over the next ridge, to see what lay beyond the immediate, familiar perimeter. The clicking Kai had mentioned earlier, a faint, rhythmic sound, had returned, louder this time, a subtle pressure on the ear. It wasn't menacing, not yet, but it was Menjie there. Maria stood, stretching her stiff muscles. The fibrous cordage she'd made earlier was now coiled neatly by her side, a testament to her quiet industry. "We can huddle here all day, but eventually, we're going to need to know what we're up against. And what we can use," she stated, her voice calm but firm. She glanced at the dense wall of glowing flora surrounding them, the shadows deep and invitingly ominous. "Who's up for a quick reconnaissance hike? Just a little peek around the block." Jax, who had been meticulously sharpening a fallen branch with Maria's multi-tool, grinned. "Thought you'd never ask. A good camping trip always includes exploring, right? Just gotta make sure we don't wander into the 'beware of alien bear' zone." He hefted his makeshift spear, testing its balance. It felt surprisingly solid in his hand. Kai, ever the cautious one, scanned the canopy above. "I agree we need to move, but let's be smart about it. That clicking, it feels close. And there are tracks." He pointed to a series of depressions in the damp soil, almost invisible under the strange flora. They weren't hoofprints, nor paws, They looked like impressions from a cluster of slender, segmented digits, alien in their geometry. The decision was made with a silent nod. A shared human impulse, stronger than any fear, propelled them forward. They moved with a practiced, almost synchronized rhythm. Jax, in the lead with his spear, Kai observing their flanks and the ground, Maria ready with her tools and newfound cordage. The moment they stepped past the firelight's comforting embrace, the jungle swallowed them whole. The air grew heavier, thick, with the scent of damp earth and something distinctly musky, almost animalistic. The glowing plants pressed in around them, their soft luminescence creating shifting, disorienting patterns. Every rustle of unseen leaves, every distant, alien croak was amplified. The ground underfoot was soft, spongy, giving way beneath their weight, then springing back with a silent rebound. They pushed through curtain-like vines, slick with iridescent dew, their faces brushing against strange, fuzzy fronds. It was a sensory overload, a primal landscape designed to overwhelm. But the humans simply adjusted, their senses sharpening, their minds processing the unfamiliar inputs with an almost casual efficiency. The rhythmic clicking grew louder, more distinct, echoing off unseen barriers. It sounded like multiple sources now, moving with a strange, deliberate purpose. Suddenly, Jax froze. His hand shot out, stopping Maria and Kai. He pointed to a patch of particularly dense, phosphorescent undergrowth. A subtle shimmer, a distortion in the air, barely perceptible. It was a camouflaged creature, a hunter, perfectly blended into the alien jungle. It was large, it was silent, and it was definitely watching them. A cold dread trickled down Kai's spine, a purely instinctual recognition of danger. But then, Jax let out a low whistle, a simple, almost nonchalant sound, and Maria took a deep, steadying breath. This wasn't panic. This was the thrill of the chase, the game. It was a dangerous, alien weekend adventure, and humanity, as always, was ready to play. They refused to be victims. They refused to be prey. They were here, they were human, and the wilderness, alien or not, was about to learn that. The shimmering distortion solidified, resolving not into a mere trick of the light, but into scales. Hard, obsidian plates that clicked and whirred with an unsettling mechanical precision as the creature detached itself from the camouflaged undergrowth. It was massive, low-slung, with too many segmented legs that moved in a disorienting ripple, like a centipede made of polished steel. Two predatory eyes, glowing with an internal, icy blue light, locked onto Jax. The clicking sound, now deafeningly close, was the sound of its mandibles, a silent promise of tearing flesh. This was no bear. This was something built for the hunt, perfectly evolved for this alien death trap. The jungle held its breath. Jax didn't hesitate. No time for fear, no space for panic. Only instinct. His makeshift spear, a sharpened branch of alien wood, became an extension of his arm. He roared, a guttural primal sound that cut through the clicking, and lunged forward. Not at the creature, but slightly to its side, aiming to divert its charge, to force it to react. It was a dirty trick, a human feint, and it worked. The creature, expecting a head-on target, compensated, shifting its bulk, and in that split second it exposed a softer, less armored underside. "Go low!" Maria barked, already scrambling, her quick fingers feeding a length of her newly braided cordage from her belt. She ran, not away, but parallel to the creature's trajectory, yanking the sturdy vine rope taut between two thick, glowing tree trunks. It was a tripwire, crude but effective, strung knee-high in the creature's path. Kai, meanwhile, had dropped to one knee, scanning the creature's movements, its armor plating, its glowing eyes. He spotted the joint, the slight give where a leg met the main body, just behind its leading pair of limbs. "Right flank, Jax, under the second joint." His voice was a calm, precise instruction, cutting through the adrenaline. The beast snarled, a sound like grinding metal, as Jax's spear scraped harmlessly off its hard outer shell, sending a shower of sparks into the humid air. It spun, its segmented tail whipping with unexpected speed, nearly catching Jax across the chest. He ducked, rolling backward, the damp earth cold and gritty against his back. The air where his head had been hissed. Then, Maria's trap sprang. The creature's leading legs snagged on the taut cordage. Its momentum, its sheer bulk, sent it sprawling with a sickening thud that shook the ground. It writhed, clicking frantically, trying to untangle itself, revealing more of its vulnerable underbelly. "Now!" Kai yelled, already moving, not with a weapon, but with a fist-sized, jagged rock he'd scavenged. He hurled it with surprising force, targeting the exposed leg joint. The rock connected with a wet, pulpy squish, and a high-pitched, almost electronic shriek tore through the jungle. The creature thrashed, its movements growing desperate. Jack scrambled back to his feet, spear ready. This wasn't some glorious hunt. This was a messy, desperate fight for survival. This was the cold, hard reality of the crucible. The earth beneath his boots was slick with strange fluid now, and the air was thick with the creature's alien musk and the coppery tang of its strange blood. It was brutal. It was terrifying. But it was theirs. The fight was ugly, a whirlwind of clicking mandibles, thrashing limbs, and human shouts. They moved as a unit, a desperate, impromptu dance of survival. Humans didn't surrender to the overwhelming odds, they just got dirtier. They just got more determined. And as the creature finally fell still, its blue eyes fading, leaving an eerie silence, Jax leaned on his spear, chest heaving. "All right," he gasped, a thin, almost manic laugh escaping his lips. "Who wants to tell the story about the time we wrestled a giant armored bug monster on our camping trip?" Because even when facing death, a human would always find a way to make it a story. The alien creature lay still, a grotesque, segmented mass of obsidian plates and iridescent fluids. The jungle, which had held its breath during the violent, desperate skirmish, slowly exhaled, filling the sudden silence with its usual cacophony of clicks, whirs, and distant, unidentifiable calls. The metallic tang of alien blood, sharp and pungent, hung heavy in the humid air, mixing with the musky scent of the fallen beast. Jax leaned heavily on his spear, chest heaving, his face slick with sweat and grime. The adrenaline crash was brutal, leaving his limbs feeling like lead, his muscles screaming. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the raw exertion, the sheer, primal effort of the fight. He stared at the motionless creature, its dead blue eyes now dull, reflecting nothing. Maria, her breath coming in ragged gasps, stumbled over, collapsing next to him, her hand instinctively reaching out to grip his arm. Her knuckles were scraped raw, and a thin, glowing fluid smeared across her cheek. Well, she managed, a weak, almost hysterical laugh bubbling up that was unexpected. Pretty sure, wrestled a chrome centipede, wasn't on the itinerary for our weekend getaway. Kai, ever practical, was already inspecting the creature, carefully poking at its armored plates with a discarded branch. His usual caution was still there, but now it was tinged with a predatory curiosity, a grim satisfaction. Unexpected, but not unwinnable. Good job with the tripwire, Maria. And Jax, that dive was textbook. He pulled a serrated, thorny leaf from a nearby plant, testing its sharpness against one of the creature's thinner leg segments. "Think we can salvage any of this? Those plates look tough. And the sinew, maybe for more cordage?" The casualness in their voices, the immediate shift from battle to assessment, would have been bewildering to their unseen overseers. They weren't broken. They weren't even particularly traumatized. They were resourceful. They were tanalo-adaptive tanaloer. They were human. They dragged the carcass back towards the relative safety of their small campfire. The effort immense. The ground groaning under the creature's bulk. The embers, still glowing faintly, seemed to welcome them. A tiny, familiar heart in the vast, indifferent wilderness. As Maria painstakingly rekindled the flames, coaxing life back into the coals, the others cleaned their wounds. Small nicks and scrapes that felt like badges of honor in the firelight. The warmth spread, not just from the fire, but from the shared experience, the unspoken bond forged in the crucible of their fight. Jax watched the flames dance, thinking about all the fires before this one. The campfires of explorers in uncharted forests. The hearths of ancient clans. The desperate flames of survivors huddling against the unknown. This fire, this defiant flicker in an alien jungle, was just another iteration. It was the legacy of humanity. carried forward by 3 tired, dirty individuals. "We did good," Maria whispered, her voice low, almost contemplative as she stared into the dancing flames. The soft glow illuminated the faint lines of fatigue around her eyes, but also a fierce, unwavering strength. "We figured it out. We didn't run. We fought back," Kai nodded, now meticulously trying to pry off one of the creature's harder plates with a sharp rock. "Yeah, we made it part of the experience. Now, the real question is, what part of it is edible? You think it tastes like chicken?" Jax grinned, a genuine, tired, triumphant smile. "Only one way to find out, Kai. Only one way." He added more fuel to the fire, watching the sparks fly upwards, a silent salute to the cosmos. They weren't just surviving, they were living. And in doing so, they echoed the countless human voices, past and present, who found warmth, safety, and a strange kind of joy by the Legion's fire, no matter where that fire burned. The alien creature, now a cooling husk, lay before them like an absurd offering. The silence that followed its demise felt less like peace and more like a held breath, as if the jungle itself was waiting to see what these strange newcomers would do next. The metallic tang of its blood, mixed with the musky scent of its flesh, permeated the air, a constant reminder of their recent, brutal victory. "All right," Jax declared, finally breaking the heavy quiet, pushing himself upright with a grimace. His shoulders ached, and his makeshift spear felt heavier now, its tip dulled from impact. "We killed it. Now what?" His eyes, though weary, held a spark of that unmistakable human curiosity, an almost childlike fascination with the unknown. Maria, ever the pragmatist, was already circling the fallen beast, her gaze assessing, calculating. She pulled a wicked-looking serrated blade from her multi-tool, its tiny edge glinting in the pale alien light. "Now, we get resourceful. This thing isn't just a dead monster, it's a resource." She tapped one of the obsidian-like plates. "Armor. Or maybe even some kind of makeshift shelter. And the meat? Well, we're gonna need protein." Her voice was steady, a clear command cutting through the lingering adrenaline. Kai, meanwhile, had managed to pry off a section of the creature's leg plating using a sharp rock. The chitinous material was surprisingly light, yet incredibly tough. "The internal structure is fascinating," he muttered, more to himself than to them, his fingers tracing the intricate patterns on the underside of the plate. "Definitely stronger than anything we've got in our pockets. We can use these for shields, or even to reinforce a small hideout." The idea of butchering the alien beast was grim, a messy, visceral affair. But hunger, raw and insistent, overshadowed any squeamishness. They used sharp rocks, the thorny leaf Kai had found, and Maria's multi-tool to carefully, painstakingly begin to dissect the creature. The internal organs were a kaleidoscope of unfamiliar colors and textures, strange bioluminescent fluids oozing from severed arteries. It was disgusting. It was necessary. They managed to carve away sections of what appeared to be muscle tissue, dark and strangely fibrous. The scent, initially off-putting, began to blend with the cooking aromas from their growing fire, transforming into something vaguely savory, even appetizing in their desperate state. They skewered the alien meat on sharpened sticks, holding it over the rekindled flames. The chitinous plates were stacked nearby, a silent promise of future protection. The sinews, painstakingly stripped and braided by Maria, lay in neat coils, ready for use. A long moment stretched as the first piece of meat cooked, sizzling and popping, releasing a new, unfamiliar smell into the air. Jax, as always, volunteered to be the taste tester. He took a small bite, chewing slowly, his face a mask of concentration. "Okay," he said, after a thoughtful pause, "it's chewy. And tastes like, well, it tastes like nothing I've ever had before. A little gamey, a little metallic." But he took another, larger bite, a grin slowly spreading across his grimy face. "It's food. And it's warm." Maria and Kai followed suit, their initial hesitation giving way to the primal urge to nourish themselves. The meat was indeed strange, alien on the tongue, but it was sustenance. It was energy. It was survival. And as they sat around the fire, chewing on their bizarre bounty, amidst the glow of the jungle and the stacked armor plates of their vanquished foe, the line between survival test and extreme camping trip blurred even further. Because humans, it turned out, didn't just adapt to new environments. They settled into them, carved out a piece for themselves, and then, inexplicably, found a way to enjoy it, even if dinner was a freshly defeated alien bug. The metallic, gamey taste of the alien meat lingered, a strange aftertaste to their narrow victory. It wasn't gourmet, not by a long shot, but it was calories, raw fuel in a world determined to drain them dry. They wiped their hands on the damp earth, the act somehow comforting in its familiarity, even as their surroundings remained utterly alien. The fire, now a roaring beacon, chased away the deeper shadows. But beyond its reach, the bioluminescent jungle still pulsed with an unsettling, vibrant life. "All right," Maria said, her voice cutting through the quiet hum of the jungle. She picked up one of the flatter, roughly triangular chitin plates they'd salvaged from the creature, turning it over in her hands. Its surface was surprisingly smooth on one side, rough and textured on the other. "We've eaten. We've fought. Now, we plan. We can't just stumble around out here waiting for the next chrome bug to jump us." She laid the plate flat on a smooth patch of ground near the fire, a makeshift table. Kai, always methodical, nodded. He'd been meticulously cataloging the different glowing plants and fungi near their camp, observing their light cycles and their varying intensities. Agreed. That creature, it wasn't random. Its patrol seemed to follow a pattern, a path. We need to identify these paths, understand the terrain, find safe zones. He pulled a thin, glowing tendril from a nearby vine, its sap leaving a sticky, luminous trail. This might actually work as ink. Jax, still feeling the ache in his muscles, stretched again. "So we're making a map? Like some kind of alien treasure hunt, but the treasure is just not dying?" He couldn't help but grin, despite the grim reality. He picked up a small, jagged piece of rock, perfect for scratching. "All right, Maria, you're the cartographer. Kai, you're the scout with the intel. I'll be the muscle who brings back more glowing sap when we run out of ink." With the chitin plates serving as their canvas, and Kai's luminous sap as their temporary ink, they began to sketch. It wasn't a map in any traditional sense, more a crude diagram of their immediate world. Maria drew a rough circle for their camp, marking the fire's location. Kai carefully added the estimated patrol routes of the clicking creature, based on his earlier observations and the location of its demise. He drew radiating lines for the different types of glowing flora, the ones that burned brighter, the ones that barely flickered. The light from the glowing sap, mixed with the ambient luminescence of the jungle, created an ethereal scene. 3 humans, huddled around a salvaged alien shield, trying to impose order on an impossible chaos. They argued softly about landmarks, about the direction they'd been thrown from, about the faint, distant hum they sometimes perceived through the forest. They marked what they knew: the spongy earth, the dense vine curtains, the patch of sharp, thorny bushes. They marked what they didn't: the source of the persistent metallic scent, the meaning of the varying light patterns in the sky. This feels better," Maria admitted, leaning back, admiring their crude map. It was barely intelligible to an outsider, but to them it was everything. It was a fragment of control, a tiny victory against the overwhelming unknown. "It's like we're building a puzzle, piece by alien piece." Jax pointed to a particularly dense, dark patch on Kai's sketch. "And what's over there? The 'Here be monsters' section?" Kai simply shrugged, a faint smirk touching his lips. "Only one way to find out, Jax. But we'll find out with a plan this time. Not just blindly wandering." The night deepened, the alien light intensifying around them. They had turned a random drop into a campsite, a deadly predator into dinner and tools, and now an infinite hostile expanse into a rudimentary map. Because for humans, the unknown isn't just something to fear. It's something to chart. The new day brought a different kind of alien light. A milky white filtered through the dense canopy, making the glowing flora shimmer like scattered emeralds. But the air, despite the visual shift, still clung to the metallic tang of alien blood and the musky scent of their fallen foe. It was a constant, unpleasant reminder of the brutality they'd faced, a lingering chill even amidst the growing humidity. Their crude map lay near the dying embers, a testament to their efforts, but it didn't change the pervasive foreignness of their surroundings. Maria squinted, scanning the dense undergrowth just beyond their small clearing. Her hands, though still sore and scraped from the previous day's fight and butchery, were already busy tying off a new length of sinew cordage, reinforced with more of the fibrous vine. "This place still stinks," she declared, her voice pragmatic. "Like a rusty junkyard in a swamp had a particularly foul baby. We need something to cut through it. Something better." She rubbed her nose, a faint wrinkle of distaste on her face. Kai, who had spent the early morning hours examining the local flora, carefully collected a handful of long, needle-like leaves from a cluster of slender, dark-barked trees that seemed to almost absorb the ambient glow, rather than emit it. They had a faint resinous sheen to them, and when he crushed one between his fingers, a sharp, clean aroma briefly wafted upwards. It wasn't exactly pine, not truly, but it was close, earthy, woodsy. "Familiar. I think I found something," Kai announced, holding out the leaves for Maria. "These. They don't glow, they don't click, and they don't seem to actively try and eat anything. And when you burn them..." He tossed a small handful into the still warm ashes of their fire. Immediately, a thin plume of pale, fragrant smoke curled upwards, carrying with it a scent that hit them with unexpected force. It was sharp, clean, like a mountain forest after a rain. It was the scent of pine, or something remarkably close, cutting through the heavy, alien atmosphere like a welcome knife. It layered over the faint soot from their fire, over the metallic blood, over the damp earth. It was a breath of home. Jax, who had been struggling to fit one of the chitin plates into a makeshift lean-to, stopped, inhaling deeply. A wide, genuine smile spread across his grimy face. "Oh man. Is that pine? Seriously? Kai, you absolute genius. I thought I was going to have to get used to smelling like alien armpit sweat for the rest of this trip." He dropped his work, moving closer to the fire, closing his eyes for a moment as he savored the familiar aroma. The scent was more than just a pleasant smell. It was a psychological anchor, a tiny, potent dose of comfort in an otherwise hostile reality. It brought back memories. Camping trips under starry skies, crisp autumn mornings, the simple joy of a crackling campfire back on Earth. It was a defiant act of domestication. They weren't just surviving here, they were actively making it theirs. Maria let out a long, slow sigh, the tension in her shoulders easing perceptibly. "Okay, now this just feels more like camping, less fighting for our lives against a biomechanical nightmare, more cozy evening by the fire. Good find, Kai. Keep these coming." She looked around at the towering, alien trees, the pulsing, luminous plants, and the lingering scent of their triumph. For a moment, the overwhelming odds seemed a little less daunting. Because humanity, it turned out, didn't just endure the alien. It injected its own small, stubborn truths into the heart of it, transforming the terrifying unknown into something just a little bit like home, one familiar scent at a time. This wasn't panic. This was resourceful. This was profoundly, stubbornly human. The scent of alien, pine, clung to their makeshift camp, a defiant whisper of home amidst the relentless hum and glow of the crucible. It was more than a pleasant aroma. It was a psychological trigger, stripping away the layers of dread and replacing them with a primal memory. Wild forests, open skies, the inherent wilderness that still resided within every human, now stirring, urging them to shed the last vestiges of civilization and truly embrace the raw, untamed reality of their situation. Maria, her multi-tool now a permanent extension of her hand, looked up from meticulously carving notches into a piece of salvaged chitin, a crude calendar of their days lost. "We can't just huddle here and smell pretty. As nice as Kai's discovery is, this environment, it's vast. And if we're going to turn this into a fun trip, we actually have to go scent exploring." Her eyes, usually so focused on practicalities, now held a spark of something more, something akin to an ancient hunter's gleam. Jax, surprisingly, felt it too. The fight with the centipede creature, the cold exhaustion, the taste of its strange flesh. It had awakened something. His senses felt sharper, his movements more deliberate. He felt less like a man dropped into an alien zoo, and more like a predator, a survivor. Agreed, he grunted, testing the balance of his spear. The map is good for theory, but our feet need to touch the ground. Let's see what else this weekend resort has to offer. He wasn't just talking about resources. He was talking about challenges. About the thrill. Kai, usually the cautious observer, nodded. My observations indicate a significant geological shift to the northwest. Higher ground. Potentially less humid, and a wider vantage point. And, he added, a rare, almost mischievous smirk touching his lips. I detect faint energy signatures there. Could be remnants of ancient alien tech. Or, just more things trying to eat us. The prospect, rather than daunting him, seemed to excite a deeper, scientific curiosity, now married to a primal drive. They moved out, the morning light a bruised watercolor through the canopy. This time, their movement was different. Less hesitant, less reactive. They were not merely traversing, they were stalking. Their steps became quieter on the spongy earth, their eyes constantly sweeping, not just for threats, but for opportunities. They climbed over colossal gnarled roots that pulsed with faint light, slid down slick, moss-covered inclines, and pushed through dense thickets of thorn-edged flora with a newfound, almost reckless abandon. Their clothes were torn, their skin scratched, but there was a wild energy in their movements. The air grew thinner as they ascended, and the omnipresent humidity eased, replaced by a cooler, cleaner breeze. From a high ridge, they finally saw it. A sprawling vista of the alien jungle stretching into the hazy distance. A sea of pulsating greens, violets, and unexpected oranges. And there, in the far distance, a monolithic structure, half swallowed by the encroaching flora, glowed with a faint, steady blue light. Jackpot, Maria whispered, her voice laced with awe, her eyes wide. Looks like we found the main attraction. Jax let out a low whistle. Well, that definitely beats another boring Saturday at home, doesn't it? The danger was still palpable, the unknown immense. But something fundamental had shifted within them. They weren't just enduring. They were engaging. They had found a strange, exhilarating freedom in this brutal environment, a deeper connection to the wilder, more primal parts of themselves. Because sometimes humanity doesn't just survive the wilderness. Sometimes it remembers it. And then it makes it its own. The monolithic structure, half swallowed by the encroaching alien jungle, pulsed with that faint, steady blue light, a beacon drawing them forward. It loomed on the horizon like a lost cathedral, its smooth, dark surfaces contrasting sharply with the organic chaos of the surrounding flora. The journey towards it was grueling, a relentless push through thick, glowing undergrowth and over slick, root-laden terrain. Every muscle in their bodies screamed in protest, but the promise of answers, or at least a new challenge, propelled them onwards. As they drew closer, the jungle began to thin, giving way to a more open, rockier landscape. The air here was cooler, tinged with a faint mineral smell, and the pervasive humid glow lessened, replaced by the starker, harsher blue light emanating from the structure itself. The clicking sounds they'd heard before were gone, replaced by a low, almost subsonic hum that resonated deep in their bones, a silent tremor beneath their feet. They approached with extreme caution, their senses heightened, every rustle, every shadow, a potential threat. Jax held his spear ready, his eyes scanning for movement. Maria had a length of braided sinew wrapped around her hand, her multi-tool open and ready. Kai, ever observant, noticed strange, almost geometric etchings on the smooth rock surfaces leading up to the structure, patterns that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. The entrance, if it could be called that, was a gaping maw in the structure's side, partially obscured by colossal vine-like growths that pulsed with an internal, sickly yellow light. It looked less like a doorway and more like a wound in the alien architecture. The air pouring out of it was even cooler, carrying with it a distinct, almost sterile scent, utterly unlike the organic, metallic smells of the jungle. "All right," Jax whispered, his voice hushed by the ominous silence of the place. "Everyone stick close. This doesn't feel like a welcome mat." They edged inside, one cautious step at a time. The interior was cavernous, bathed in the same ghostly blue light, revealing walls of polished, dark material that felt cold and unnervingly smooth to the touch. The hum intensified, a low thrumming that seemed to vibrate through their very teeth. It was an alien space, vast and silent, designed by hands utterly incomprehensible. Then Maria stopped, her eyes wide with disbelief, fixed on something tucked into a shadowed alcove, partially hidden by a fallen piece of debris. It was small, insignificant, almost. But her breath hitched. "No way," she breathed, her voice barely audible over the hum. Tucked away, sheltered from the alien elements, was a splash of familiar color. A bright, impossible patch of faded yellow. It wasn't organic. It wasn't alien. It was fabric. Worn, but unmistakably synthetic. A thin, gray seam ran across its surface, ending in a small, metallic pull tab. Jax and Kai followed her gaze, their eyes widening in unison. It was a tent. A small, two-person backpacking tent, crumpled but intact, its nylon shell still defiant after untold time in this alien world. Jax reached out a trembling hand, brushing aside some alien dust. His fingers found the zipper. He pulled. The sound that followed was unmistakable, a sharp, familiar asterisk ZZZZZZZZIP asterisk that echoed through the vast, silent chamber. It was the sound of a zipper, the hiss of metal teeth sliding against metal teeth, utterly mundane on Earth, utterly shocking in this alien crucible. It cut through the profound hum, a stark, defiant statement of human ingenuity and presence. It was the sound of a camping trip, here, now, in an impossible place. Inside, nestled in the faded nylon, were two sleeping bags, a small, worn backpack, and a few scattered items. A dented canteen, a half-eaten energy bar, its wrapper surprisingly pristine. "Someone else was here," Kai whispered, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and profound unease. "Humans. Before us." The zipper's hiss, a mundane sound in any Earth campground, reverberated through the vast, humming alien chamber like a clarion call. It was a declaration, a stark, undeniable proof that they were not alone. Not in their humanity, at least. Jack stood frozen, hands still on the zipper pull, staring into the dim interior of the battered nylon tent. Inside, two faded sleeping bags lay rolled, slightly askew, as if their occupants had merely stepped out for a moment. A dented, stainless steel canteen rested on one, its familiar curve a stark contrast to the angular alien architecture surrounding them. A small Earth-standard backpack, its fabric worn but intact, sat propped against the tent wall, its main flap slightly ajar. And on the ground, near what would have been the tent's entrance, lay a half-eaten energy bar, its foil wrapper surprisingly pristine, a bite mark clearly visible. They were here," Maria whispered, her voice thick with a mixture of awe and profound, almost painful recognition. She knelt, her hand hovering over the energy bar, as if afraid to disturb a sacred relic. The simple, everyday objects spoke volumes, telling a story no alien sensor could ever decipher. Another group of humans, dropped into this same death trap, had responded not with despair, but by setting up camp. Kai's usual scientific detachment had vanished, replaced by a wide-eyed wonder. He picked up a small, weathered paperback book lying near the backpack, its cover surprisingly intact. It was a fantasy novel, its pages dog-eared, a bookmark made from a crude twig marking a spot halfway through. "Someone was reading this," he murmured, his fingers tracing the worn cover. "Someone was relaxing here. In a death trap." The realization hit them with the force of a physical blow. These weren't just survivors, these were campers. They hadn't just endured, they had lived. They had brought their little slice of Earth, their mundane comforts, into the heart of an alien nightmare. They had refused to let the crucible define their experience. Jax let out a choked laugh, a raw, emotional sound that echoed strangely in the sterile chamber. This is incredible," he said, his voice husky. "They actually brought a tent." They were probably telling ghost stories around their own campfire, just like us, maybe even roasting their own chrome centipedes. He picked up the energy bar wrapper, turning it over in his hand. The familiar brand logo, faded but recognizable, was a beacon of defiant normalcy. For the overseers, watching from afar, the anomaly was deepening. Their sophisticated sensors recorded no distress signals, no signs of fear from these new specimens. Instead, they observed a profound shift in their emotional state, a surge of camaraderie, of shared recognition. The humans weren't just surviving, they were finding a legacy. They were connecting to a history of stubborn, inexplicable resilience. Maria, now sitting cross-legged on the ground, her gaze fixed on the tent, felt tears prick at her eyes. They weren't tears of sadness, but of a fierce, almost unbearable pride. "They made it a home," she whispered, her voice imbued with a quiet reverence. "Even here, they made it a home." Jax reached into his own pocket, pulling out a half-eaten, slightly squashed alien mushroom he'd saved. He held it up, a wry, tired smile on his face. "To the last campers," he said, his voice clear, cutting through the low hum of the alien structure. "To the ones who came before, may their marshmallows never burn." He took a bite of the mushroom, chewing it thoughtfully, because humanity, it turned out, wasn't just about surviving. It was about finding joy, finding connection, and finding a laugh, even in the bleakest, most impossible circumstances. And sometimes, it was about toasting the ghost of someone else's resilience, reminding themselves that they were part of a lineage that simply refused to die politely.